On the line, Brooks Newmark, and delighted I am to have you, Conservative MP. Let's talk a little bit about the chemical weapons that have been addressed in the situation many times, that they say that Assad has the largest stockpile of chemical weapons possibly in the world. As we know, and it's no secret, I mentioned before in this interview, that we know the rebel army are being backed or infiltrated by Al-Qaeda and possibly other terrorist group. The consequence of them overthrowing Assad and getting their hands on those chemical weapons isn't even worth thinking about.
Correct. And I think that what happened is, as the war progressed, that these chemical weapons, which I believe were held over 27 different sites in Syria, have been consolidated centrally, I believe, into 2 or 3 sites. Now, I think the West has said there is a red line on the use of chemical weapons. And according to a recent UN report, where they have said there is credible evidence that small amounts of sarin have been used, I believe this is Assad's attempt to stretch the elasticity of that red line and effectively saying, okay, well, I'm going to use small amounts and let's see if the West does anything. If we do nothing, then he will, I suspect, use more and more amounts of it. So I think, well, I'm not privy to these discussions. I suspect both in Washington and in London and in Paris, and I suspect even in the EU headquarters in Brussels, there is a lot of conversation going around on this issue of the use of chemical weapons.
Now, whilst we were talking about prior to Al-Qaeda and the danger of Al-Qaeda infiltrating and being part of the rebel army, prior to that confirmation, which I think came out last week or the week before, there was a great favour by countries like UK and America and I think France or whatever in backing the rebel army, as you say. But that seems to have diminished somewhat since the announcement that Al-Qaeda are definitely part of the rebel army.
Well, you sort of say part of the army. The problem is the army is not one whole.
It's not an army, is it?
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
The opposition today is a highly fragmented group of a variety of different groups spread over a very wide geographic area. There is one group known as the Free Syria Army, who is one group who is fights under the banner led by General Idris. Then there are probably about 4 different Islamic groups fighting completely separately from the FSA, one of which, or the largest of which, is Jabhat al-Nusra. Now, Jabhat al-Nusra, which, according to, again, calculations that people have made, number about 3,500 people, is not a large number. The fact that their leader in Syria has allied themselves with Al-Qaeda, again, has sent a strong message as to really what Jabhat al-Nusra is about, but also I think has led to a number of FSA fighters who were thinking about joining them not to join them because they want nothing to do with Al-Qaeda.
Okay, can I just, this is sort of in conversation, if you want, this question I'm putting to you. Let's assume that UK get involved with the rebels. Let's assume they get involved by arming the rebels. I think it's quite clear that Assad is backed by the Russians, partly by the Russians. Will this bring to the table a conflict between UK and the Russians?
Well, I mean, again, I think that the Russians who have decided on the Security Council really to go out on a limb and backing Bashar Assad, notwithstanding the incredible evidence of the brutality of his regime, in particular the Shabiha, which is his secret police, in which there are about 50,000 members of the Shabiha who go around doing incredibly brutal things. Now, it doesn't mean, and we've obviously seen reports of this, that there are certain elements within the opposition who also do brutal things. But it is very much part of the modus operandi of the Assad regime to absolutely be brutal and terrorize and kill his own people in order to stay in power. The opposition are really trying to defend their lives, trying to defend their families. And I think anybody who knows anything about warfare, people behave in an extraordinarily ways, in extraordinarily bad ways, when they are brutalized and their families are brutalized. I think the Russians are beginning to realize they're on the wrong side of this battle here. And they, ironically, in wanting to become much more part and parcel of the civilized world, as a G8 member, are finding themselves allied with somebody who has, in fact, gone beyond the pale.
Right. Now, there was in your article, and I must congratulate you on the article. As I say, I don't agree with you, but then, that's what we are.
You know what it's done? It's got people thinking about things.
Well, exactly. Finally, I just want to bring up the point about Assad's wife. The thing about Assad, he looks so westernized. He looks so normal. He looks like one of Monty Python's Flying Circus with his little moustache. He doesn't look like an Arab leader. And, you talk about his private police force, his brutality. Name a country in the Middle East outside of Israel that don't have these brutes within them. You can't say that in Saudi Arabia they don't have them. It is a disgusting thing that should be addressed, not just towards Syria, but any of these countries.
But hold on a second. I don't believe the Saudis have
a brutal police force.
Any of the Gulf states have an equivalent of what the Shabiha does. So I don't think.
Well, you can't measure it.
One may not like the Salafist way of life. One may not like the way that Saudi Arabia in particular treats women and so on, but they certainly don't have a police force anything like the Shabiha. So
surely in Iran, if you're gay, you can be beheaded. You can't get more brutal than that,
you're
can
absolutely
you?
right.
Yeah.
But I also put Iran beyond the pale as well. So in a way that I would not.
Well, I think if you look deeply into any of these countries, I think, Brooks, you'd probably be shocked, as most of the world would be, what's going on. I remember, was it Iran? I remember interviewing a woman called, I can't remember. She wrote a book called Not Without My Daughter.
Right.
I can't remember her name. She was married to a doctor, and they went to live there in Iran. And the brutality dished out to women was beyond belief. Anyway, we're not going to talk about other countries. I just want to quickly touch.
Anyway, let me answer your question, because you actually made a good observation, which is that he and his wife seem very westernized and almost come across as civilized, which, when you meet with them, they do, particularly his wife, Asma, who grew up in the UK and everything. Bashar Assad was trained for 2 years here in London as an ophthalmologist. He, I suspect, was planning to live in the UK had his older brother, Basil, not been killed in a car accident. So he's almost the accidental leader. When you meet him, he is actually quite soft-spoken. He is actually quite easy to engage with. He has a rational approach to, when one asks questions, to his way of thinking and his way of behaving. He even, as I said, talked a good game when it came to political reform. Mm-hmm. I think people like Erdogan, who's the prime minister in Turkey, believed him. I think there were leaders throughout the West who wanted to engage with him, believed he was a political reformer. That bell, by the way, means the start of Parliament, if you can hear that in the background. Who believed that he was a political reformer. But the problem was that he was almost bipolar. He would talk gently and civilized with you when you were sitting in front of him. As soon as the door would close and he's with his family and his cronies, he would almost revert to type. And he was almost two very different people. The one that faced the West, a civilized reformer with a beautiful wife who understood the West, wants to engage with the West, and as soon as the door was closed, would be quite brutal in many ways to his own people. I think to get 97 or 98% of the vote in a democratic election, I think he was only beaten by Saddam Hussein in that.
Democratic. Come on, it's like saying that Hamas were.
I was saying that tongue in cheek.
Tongue in cheek. It's like I always say that when people throw it in my face that Hamas were democratically voted in Gaza. Yeah, sure they were. Anyway, we're not going to go into that subject right now. We're going to go on to just quickly the touch about his wife, because in your article you more or less said, reading between the lines, that his wife in many ways would have liked him to have done something good in Syria, or stopped when he had done something good for Syria, and then bow out. And you were amazed by that statement.
Yes, I mean, I always wanted to encourage Bashar Assad to take the line of Ataturk, which was to reform his country and bow out as a great leader and a great reformer, and not sort of cling on to power. And when I met with Asma, his wife, in early 2011, just before the war started off, I raised this with her. And she almost sort of wistfully said to me, yes, I'd really like him, ideally, to do one more term in power, really bring through the political reform, and then retire. To me, that was incredibly surprising, because it sort of validated in some ways what I really wanted to believe could happen, but instinctively, given his behavior, was not the way that he was proceeding, because reform was coming incredibly slowly in Syria at that time.
Well, listen, it's been absolutely brilliant. Spain, do you ever get down here at all, Brooks? Do you come down and visit us in Spain?
I'd love to. And by the way, we just launched last night, which I was at, the Conservative Friends, and I appreciate you have listeners from all parties down there, but we launched the Conservative Friends of Spain at the Spanish Embassy, which I was delighted to go to. So hopefully I will have an opportunity to come down to Spain and perhaps visit you.
I've been at a few of them down here myself in the Marbella region. I think Dottie Smalley used to head it up down here. So, of course, you have a big following down here. And I've had your leader, I'm delighted to say, on my show, David Cameron, and when he went up visiting up in Ronda, one of his little trips to us down here. He was it seemed we weren't talking so much politics at the time. We were just talking about a leisurely afternoon with some sardines and sangria. Anyway, listen, it's great to have you on my show. If you don't mind, we'd love to call on you again, Brooks, and thanks for joining us.
Great. I enjoy talking to you too.
Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.